Yeah, we're going okay. So thank you so much, Georgia, for coming on to the Dead Parent Club podcast. Welcome. Oh gosh.
Oh my God. We couldn't get logged on and now you're breaking your mic.
Please, can you introduce yourself to our listeners? Your name, where you're from, what you do, like a dating website.
Yeah, I'm single as well, so if anyone's single, like, hit me up.
Yeah, so that'll be funny. Me and friends have actually talked about having like a grief dating program because you just got on with other grievers so much better. Like you just be able to talk about grief and
it's not awkward. It's like, oh, who died of yours? And like, oh, my dad died. You died. Oh, your mum. That's well sad. And then you just chat about it.
Yeah, it'd be so much better. But yeah, anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so my name's Georgia. I'm 24. I'm originally from Devon. At the moment, I live in London, and I'm an actor / teaching assistant. So when I'm not acting, I'm a teacher.
Very nice. Obviously, you are a part of the Dead Parent Club, unfortunately. But can you please give us a background into your loss and their name and what they were like?
Yeah. So this was my dad. He passed away in March 2020. So he passed away I think we were like a week into lockdown.
A great time to die.
Yeah.
Exceptional choices there.
Yeah, it was just before lockdown. So basically my dad, his whole life, he had an immune deficiency disorder. So I was used to my dad being in hospital like a lot. So for example, when my dad got a cold, it put him in hospital because he had like a really weak immune system. So I was kind of used to my dad being like ill and like tired. It was kind of like the norm. And then it was, when was it? It must have been like mid-February. He fell unwell, went into hospital, was in hospital for 6 weeks, and then he passed away.
Wow.
So it was quite a rapid. Yeah, definitely. It was rapid.
Was it cancer or?
Yes. Yeah. So he went into hospital and we didn't really know what was wrong, but he was very, very poorly and he like deteriorated really, really fast. And it took them a little while to figure out what was going on because I think because he had loads of other illnesses due to his immune deficiency, I think that masked a lot of the cancer symptoms. So I feel like my dad probably had cancer for like quite a while.
Time.
Yeah. And then eventually when he like got into hospital and was put on the cancer ward, he was diagnosed with Burkitt's lymphoma, which is a blood cancer, which is very stereotypical of evolving from the immune deficiency disorder that my dad has. Like it's very common.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, yeah, he had Burkitt's lymphoma, which is a blood cancer. He also, bless him, he had a tumour that had grown up his spine as like a response to the cancer. And then he got pneumonia and that killed him off.
Not the greatest mix, really, is it?
No, 100% not.
What was it like kind of growing up with your dad being that ill all the time? Like, was he always, did you guys grow up with the knowledge that your dad could pass away from like a cold at any point? Like,
this is
were you very aware of like death, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I'll tell you this straight up. From being probably about a teenager, I knew that my dad was not going to be here for the majority of my life. Like, just like, when you just knew. Yeah, like I just knew from him like being ill all the time. I just kind of like knew in my gut that my dad wasn't. I could just feel that he wasn't going to be here.
Yeah,
like the really important things in my life, and as well, I was really close to my dad. He was like my best mate, and I think that made me know even more that he maybe wasn't going to be here. I was like, I can't be that lucky that like my dad is my best mate and he's just here for like all the best bits. It was almost too good to be true. So I just had this gut feeling of being like, I don't think my dad is going to be around for a long time.
With that in mind, like, do you think you were as close to him because you were so aware of him being like ill a lot and because you might lose him at some point? Do you think that was like an effect of that, or do you think you were just both, no matter what had happened in the circumstances, you just meshed very well together?
Yeah, I felt very maternal towards my dad. He lived on his own. I lived with him for a period of time before I came to London, and because he was ill all the time, I definitely developed this, like, we had a best mate relationship. We also had the parental relationship where he was my dad, but I also felt like a mother to him because I had to look after him a lot. And I felt so protective over him because I knew, bless him, that he was so vulnerable to getting ill. So I think you're right. I think knowing how unwell he was, I think I formed like a really strong attachment to him to try and protect him for like as long as I could.
Which is so lovely though as well.
Yeah.
At the same time, like, it's so nice to have had such a good relationship with your parent, isn't it? Like, how blessed when a lot of people don't get that.
Yeah, 100%. So grateful, 100%.
Do you have any siblings or anything?
Yeah, I do. So I've got a middle brother, so we're the same mum and same dad, and then I've got a younger brother and he's a different dad. So it's me and my brother who lost my dad.
Are you and your brother close as well?
Yeah, we are, but my brother, he is very closed off with his emotions. He's different to me. I don't mind talking about things. I'm very open, whereas he's definitely a bit more closed off and reserved when it comes to
you see that a lot, not to be stereotypical, but even from this podcast, like 95% of the people that offers come onto the show are girls, and like 93% of my audience are female, and I think that just says it all. And like, I'm so glad that I can be here to provide a space if guys do want to talk about it, they do want to listen.
100%.
But I think that is just for some reason just a fact of life, and it's sad.
I know.
I wish they could feel like they could open up more, but sort of like kind of silently struggling.
I know. We talk about my dad, like there's no like, we bring things up all the time, like memories. I like to remember when dad did this, dad did that, but I guess me and my brother don't talk about like literally like him dying.
It's the same with me and my brothers. Me and my brothers will talk about my mum in passing, but we won't have like conversations like I'd be like, I'm really fucking sad, like I really fucking struggle with it, but I won't say that to them, like they're not my people to say that to, so I just wouldn't.
And I think there's like this mutual understanding, like it would be the same with your siblings, and it's the same with my brother, like we both know what we're going through, like we both know
it's hard.
The feeling, like you almost don't need to say it because it's like, do you know what I mean? I know that he's dealing with it and he knows that I'm dealing with it, so
got that mutual ground. Like, how have you found the past year then? Because this has been the most isolating time for everyone. And I think to lose somebody during this year, one can be a blessing in a weird way, because you have no choice but to like deal with your emotions and kind of sit with yourself. Whereas in normal day-to-day life, you get distracted by work, socializing, like just everything piles on top of you. Whereas also must be awful because you can't find your kind of like community or like those friends that kind of talk to you about your grief.
I will say, like, I was very lucky with my dad in the sense of, because it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, I was able to like be with him. My dad was in hospital from 6 weeks. He lived in there for 6 weeks, and then he died in hospital. And I was able to like live with him in his room, take care of him, nurse him, because of the tumor on his spine, he wasn't able to walk, so he was bedbound. So like I was helping, like cleaning him, feeding him, all those kinds of things. And I know that for a lot of people who have lost family members because of COVID, they did not get to be with their loved ones. So for that, I am just eternally grateful because I got to have that closure. Like, sorry, I got fluff in my mouth. Like watching, I know, being with my dad for all that time, looking after him, even being with him, like watching him die it was like the worst thing that I've ever witnessed, but they're the things that you need for closure. Do you know what I mean?
100%. Just going on to that.
And then,
just very quickly, just like, thingy, just watching your dad die.
Oh, yeah.
On the notes that you sent over to me, like when you say like it's not how it's portrayed in the films and stuff, it's not. Like, oh my
I
god,
know.
the just most horrific thing. And I think, don't get me wrong, some people's experience of watching their parents die, it can be quite peaceful. Everybody has a different experience. From mine, it was not fucking peaceful. Like,
was it not?
Just the whole. My mum was like dying for like a week, as in like got to that point where she wasn't comatose anymore. She wasn't there, but her body just kept going.
Really?
And like the death rattle when like everything's going through the throat.
My dad had that. Yeah.
Like the sound of it now just goes through, and it gets to the point where you're just like, please just go.
I know.
Like, it's
And do you know what? It's like, what I said to you about the films. I've watched all the documentaries about different things. When you hear the word cancer, you're like, that's very bad. You're like, that is bad. And like in your head, you think you know what that looks like. But when you see cancer killing someone in front of you, oh my God, it is so intense. The things that I've learned and witnessed that like can happen to a human and to the body, to the, it's crazy. And I look back, because I was with my dad so intensely for the 6 weeks, I don't think I realised how unwell he looked when he was in hospital. And now there's like the odd picture that comes up on that we've like WhatsApp, my family WhatsApp group, and there's just this picture of my dad that he sent of himself, bless him, when he was still okay. And I look back at it now and I'm like, oh my God, like
they're like very gaunt, aren't they? Like
so gaunt.
I've got a picture of my mum from maybe a week before she died.
Yeah.
And I didn't realise at the time, and I look at it now and like I can see the pain in her eyes, and like her skin, like everything just looks like death. And
my dad was the same as your mum though. The doctors called us in and they were like, your dad's very unwell. And they were like, I know. I was like, okay. It was just me actually. When I found out he was going to die, it was me and my uncle. It was so surreal, and I just knew. The doctors came in and they were like, "Can we chat to you?" And they were like, "Your dad is like really unwell." And I was like, "Okay." And then they were like, "He's got pneumonia on his lung, like that's killing him." And I was like, "Okay." And they were like, "He's probably got about 2 days." And I was like,
wow.
Okay. And I remember, so bizarre, I had my hands together and I was like digging my nails into my hands to like counteract the pain of what I had just been told.
Like mental to physical.
Yeah. And I was, and I've never done something like that before. It was so bizarre, but I remember just sitting there and like pushing my nail into my hand to like counteract the pain. And I was doing it because I didn't want to cry and make that doctor feel bad that he had to tell me that my dad was going to die. That is what was going through my head. I sat there and in my head I was like, Georgia, don't cry. I was like, he has such a hard job. He has to tell people, tell the family members that to die. And he left the room and then I burst into tears. But in that moment I was like, I don't want him to feel bad. I don't want him to feel bad that he has to tell me that.
I bet you what then he was like bloody psycho, didn't even cry.
I know. Yeah. But my dad was the same as your mum, so then they induced him into like a coma. Like they gave him loads of
syringe driver.
Yes, the syringe drive thing. And they'd said 2 days, but he hung on for a week. Like he was asleep. They told me on the Monday and then he passed away on the Sunday morning. So yeah,
it's hard. It's a really really hard time, and it's when I have experienced like the two separate experiences where like my mum's was so traumatizing. Her mum died about 14 months after my mum did. So my grandma, and for some reason I was just in the right place at the right time, or the wrong place at the wrong time, who knows. But she was in hospital, but nobody knew that she was dying. She didn't come across as she was dying. She stopped eating as much, but she was like, she'd been okay for ages, and then one day she just like was really sleepy, just kept sleeping, and then before we knew it, in front of me, she passed away really peacefully. And that was like nice.
Really?
But yeah, it is.
Yeah.
People we aren't educated enough about what it's like to have somebody die from cancer, specifically
No.
because it is a terrible, terrible disease.
Yeah, and it's like I can't even tell you how surreal it is. Like my dad passed really peacefully, just like his breaths got really spread out.
Yeah.
We were all, it was like the morning, the person had come in and was like, "Do you want some toast?" We were like, "Yeah." We were sat like eating some toast. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We were, because we'd been there for the week. We were living there.
Yeah.
It was so surreal, but it became like our normal. Like Dad was there asleep in the middle, but we sat there all day. We were watching telly, having conversations, still talking to Dad, because apparently the last thing that goes is your hearing. So like I spoke to him as if he was awake, holding his hand, like giving him water, like, do you know what I mean? Doing all that as if he was still there. And then he just took his like last few breaths. And then you're just sat there looking at like
that moment is just like
the body.
Fuck. Like when, like, you know, because the breath is so spaced out, when that last breath happens, you're kind of still you're waiting for the next one. Like you're waiting.
You're like, is that it?
When it doesn't, you just like, you kind of look around and you're like,
I know.
Like, fuck. The worst thing has happened. I think, nothing can prepare you for that, I think.
No, it can't. It really can't. And also it's like, I don't even know what age is the right age to lose a parent, because I think at any point it's going to be
pretty
horrible,
shite.
isn't it? Yeah, it really is.
It is the worst thing. In like the kind of months afterwards, then, like, bearing in mind that we're in lockdown and you can't see friends and stuff all the time, like, did you find people that knew how to speak to you about your grief? Or like you've mentioned on emails and stuff to me that your friends weren't really very well equipped to talk to you about it, and you were so right when you said that, like, as soon as they don't mention it once, that becomes the tone for every single conversation that you have.
Yeah, and it was difficult, obviously, because I think I was like the first friend in my group who lost a parent.
Same.
So obviously it's new to me. Obviously, I don't know how to deal with losing a parent, and I get that it's new to them. And I definitely feel like the feeling was that they had was, we don't want to bring up Georgia's dad because we don't want to upset her. Like, I know that it was coming from a loving place, the fact that they didn't bring it up. But to me, it came across as like, oh, that set the tone. So we're not talking about the fact that my dad died. Right.
So he didn't exist, and then that's fine.
It just kind of it made me feel a little bit isolated, because I was like, oh fuck, can I not bring it up? I was like, and then I found it a bit difficult, or I was like, how do I move forward? And in the end I had to kind of send a group text to my friends, and I was like, I laid out, I was like, this is how I'm dealing with it.
See, I love this. This is brilliant. Talk to me about this. I feel like anybody listening now, if you're struggling with your friends not talking about it, listen to this. Because I think this, if you're this kind of person anyway and you think this might help, then
So I obviously, because both the times I've got two separate friendship groups. I've got a friendship group back home and a friendship group in London. And with both times first seeing them, my dad wasn't brought up. And to me, I was like, I feel like it's very natural when you see someone to be like, I'm so sorry for your loss. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to go in deep, but I feel like that's quite a normal, maybe I'm wrong.
It's the minimum that's expected, right? Like, it's like a
so
tick a box at least.
Yeah, I came away from that feeling a bit like confused and definitely a bit vulnerable, because I was obviously struggling with all the things that I was feeling, and I was like, oh my gosh, can I not speak to my friends about it? So in the end, what I did was I formed out a text that just said, this is where I'm at emotionally and mentally, and this is how I would like to deal with my grief. So my message was something like, my dad was my best mate. My dad was my life, and I loved him so much. And I don't want to stop talking about him because he was the most important person in my life. I love talking about my dad. He was the best human. And I want that to continue. I don't want there to ever be a feeling of, we can't bring up Georgia's dad, or, oh my God, we can't talk about parents, or we can't talk about death, because like, that's fine. And I said, and I'm also very, very open. And I said, if you've got questions about anything like cancer, losing a parent, a dad dying, I really do not mind talking about it, because for me, I find it so therapeutic. And the more I talk about it, the more I can process what has happened. So it not only helps me, but then it helps my friends as well. So I just sent them a text and I was like, this is how I would like to deal with it, please.
How did they respond?
Relief.
Oh, okay.
Relief.
Brilliant.
They were all relieved. They were like, oh my gosh, Georgia, thank you so much for saying that, because we didn't know how to play it. We didn't want to upset you. Now that you've said it, we all know where we stand and we can put that into motion.
But has that changed it for you then? Like, they're not going to be as good as people who have experienced it, because they just can't, that side of it just isn't there, being able to kind of empathize. But like, do they kind of consciously make a bit more of an effort sometimes? No,
they are really good. And in the and I kind of, in the message, I sort of said they're very good, that they know that if I sort of drop my dad into conversation, they'll pick up on that, and then we'll talk about my dad for a bit. Do you know what I mean? Even if it's just something like, oh yeah, because when my dad used to, and they go, oh yeah, do you remember when? And then they leave little pathways so that I can just say stuff, and they ask questions, but it doesn't feel intense. It doesn't have to be, tell me about how your dad died of cancer. It can just be talking about memories, talking about what my dad used to do. And that is a really nice way of like unloading some of the grief.
Yeah, 100%. There's nothing worse than feeling like your parent didn't exist.
Yeah, 100%.
It's a weird thing. It's like, from that then, like, what advice do you think that you would give friends who are listening who haven't lost a parent but are listening? So I have some listeners that actually listen to the podcast because they know people that have lost a parent, and they want to kind of get. I know. I was like, you get brownie points.
Good, that. Yeah, you do. That's a good friend.
It's like, what do you think that your top 3 things would be for like a friend that wants to support a friend that's grieving? Even I struggle with this. I think it's hard.
Yeah, I would say reach out and open that door. Even if the response that you get from the person who is grieving is like, don't want to talk about it. No, don't bring it up to me. I think there is nothing wrong with just offering the door to be open. So, because then that person knows at any point, like, hey, I could go back and open that door and I could have that conversation. It's like with anyone struggling with like mental health, not just grief. I think asking someone if they're okay, or I am here if you need me, by the way, like, you don't have to use it now. I think it's good to know that you have doors open. So that person who's grieving in times when they're feeling so alone, they go, hang on a minute, I could go speak to this person. They said they'd want to talk to me about it. And I feel like I could go and talk to them.
Yes.
So I would say be brave and reach out. I would also say, I think, don't be afraid to ask the grieving person about the loved one that they've lost, and don't be afraid of the reaction you're going to get. So I said to my friends, I was like, you might ask me about my dad tomorrow and I might be fine, laughing, giggling. You might ask me the next day and I might be floods in tears. That's no response to you. That's no offense to you. Like, you haven't upset me. It's just whatever part of grief that I'm feeling that day is what's coming out and what needs to come out.
I actually love crying. I love it. Like, I always feel bad when people bring it up and then they're like, oh, I'm so sorry for bringing it up. And I'm like, no, it's nice.
Good. I say that, honestly, every time I start crying about it with my friends, I'm like, it's good to cry. Because it is.
It is so good. There's nothing like a good, like, soul cry.
Oh my God. Well, I thought I had felt like bad crying, but grief crying, like when I have those moments where I think for me, when I have those moments that I can feel that I'm upset and that I need to cry, I just think about everything. Like you do. I think about
soul shattering. Like,
I think about all the memories, everything,
the future things I'm gonna miss. Yeah,
Dad's not going to be at my wedding. Dad's not going to see my baby.
The time I told my mum I hated her.
Yeah, wow. That's it. Yeah, you go through everything. I listen to his voice note. Like, you make yourself cry more.
Actually, I cried the other day just thinking about the voice notes I've got on my phone. I didn't even listen to them. I was just thinking about them, and then I was in bed. I was about to go to sleep. My boyfriend was asleep. I was in bed. I just started thinking about these voice notes, and I just a few tears down my face, and I was like, for fuck's sake.
You've got to, though, because for me as well, I can feel it building inside of me. Like, when I know that I need to have a cry about it, and then I cry hard, and then afterwards I feel like, okay. Like, we're a bit clearer now, we can carry on until the next one, you know.
I think as time passes, because it's been like over 5 years for me now, and I think the amount of times that I cry reduces, but when I do cry,
it's hard.
It's like a fucking torrential rainfall.
Literally.
It's shocking.
Yeah, literally.
So
I fully relate. Oh, sorry, go.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I fully relate on the guilt thing. So that's where I'm definitely at in my grief at the moment.
Yeah.
Like, I lie in bed and I'm like, I should have done this whilst he was in hospital. Should have done this. Could have done this. And then I'm going back like 5-6 years, and I'm like, remember that time that you had an argument, or remember? And I'm just like,
bitch,
and you do. You can drive yourself a little bit crazy, because I know there's a saying like you can't have regrets, and you can't punish yourself, because in that moment, that's
much easier said than done, isn't it? Like,
that's what happened. Yeah,
I've got like 3 things that always come to my mind when I feel like guilty. One is when like I used to lie on my bed during the day, like texting, whatever, and then my mum would come in and lie on the bed next to me, and she'd want to have a chat, and I'd be like, "What do you want?" I'd go away. And then another one is when she was like dying. I was meant to be in my final year of uni, so I'd gone back to freshers. This was about a month before she died, and I think even like 2 weeks before she died, I was out partying, and I'm like, "You bitch!" And then the third one is not spending enough time with her. But I knew she was terminal. I'm just like, "Oh God, like, I hate myself." But like, you like those are just emotions that I just have to deal with, and I can't change them. I can't hate myself for it. But I think there are always like a few kind of memories, the recurrent memories that come back, that you kind of your like guilt memories, and you're like,
we like didn't know my dad was going to die. Like initially when he was in hospital, they were like, he's going to have chemo. The doctor was like, he's 55, like we feel like this will be okay. I was sat there going in my head, I don't think he's going to survive chemo, because my dad, he was so unwell. I was like, she was telling me, she was like, yeah, he's going to do like 4 rounds of chemo. And I was like, he's not going to live past chemo.
Yeah.
But at that point, I said to the doctor, I was like, do I need to move home? Because I was still in London at this point. Going back and forth to work. I was going to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, coming back to Devon from London Thursday evening, living in the hospital Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then I was doing that because I'd said to the doctor, I was like, is he going to die? I was like, do I need to come home? And she was like, at this point, we've got no cause for concern. But like in my heart, I'm like I feel the guilt of like, I should have been with my dad. Like I was his best mate. He was mine. Work didn't matter, but I'm like a workaholic. So in my head, I was like, oh my God, no, I can't. I didn't want to let people down. I was like, I'm at a full-time job. I had all these emotions, but now I look back on it and I'm like, I should have just like fucking come home. Like irrelevant, money, irrelevant, working, irrelevant. Like all of those things, all of those things can come back. I can get another job. I can earn more money, but the time with my dad, I cannot get back.
And I think there's no point in me saying at this point now, like, oh, you know, your dad wouldn't have wanted that for you, because you know that yourself. You don't need to know that. It is just the pressure that you put on yourself, and you're always going to be your own worst critic, aren't you? So I think, and people always say to me, like, your parents never remember the times that you were mean to them. Like, that's not a thing. And I'm like, well, I freaking remember it. And I have to live with it. Doesn't matter to her now, does it?
Literally.
So annoying. In like previous emails and stuff that we've exchanged and stuff that I've seen, like you've mentioned that you've been kind of actively just like trying to open up the conversation more on your own social media accounts, which I think is great, because obviously grief just isn't a thing that's talked about enough online anywhere. Are you finding that like useful for your own grief journey, and like do you get any kind of responses to that from people saying, oh, this is so enlightening, or is it just like for you, is it just like a kind of like a coping mechanism, I suppose, because it is, isn't it, like talking about what you've gone through?
Both. The day that my dad died, I came home and I sat in my room and I said to myself, I've got 2 choices here. I was like, I can choose the easy option, which is I can like give up. I could move back home. I could quit my job. I could become depressed. I could literally like break down and shut down, and everyone would be okay with that and be like, her dad just died, that's fine. So, and I was like, I could do that. And that would be the easy option, because you're in so much pain.
That's like, what you want to do.
Grief is so painful. You're like, well, and you really can fall into all that negative mindset, and you can be angry. And I sat there and I was like, or I've got the other option, or I was like, I use this pain and I use my dad, who would not have wanted me to go down that route, and I use my dad as an inspiration to just motivate me through each day to do better, to be better. I got up that next morning and I went for a run, and I was like, do you know what? I'm going on a run because my dad would have loved to have gone on a run. That's my mentality with life now. So anything I do, like I step outside my door each morning and I take a breath of fresh air and I'm like,
I love that.
That's for dad. That's for dad. Because my dad was in hospital for 6 weeks, couldn't walk, couldn't do anything. And I was like, he would have loved that, just to go outside for a few seconds. And I get to go outside every day. How lucky am I? And so I just started posting on social media as definitely a coping mechanism for myself to like reinforce what I was saying.
Yeah.
So like the positive mindset, the things that I was trying to do, the things that I was focusing on, I wanted to put them out there to like reinforce to myself, like, okay, you've said it, you can do it.
Yeah.
And I also just wanted to normalize the conversation, like saying the words cancer, death, my dad has died. Like it was really bad. Like just making it not a topic of conversation that people feel weird about. You should be able to talk about grief and death and it not be like a taboo subject of, oh my God, she's talking about
the same
death.
way that we talk about love and life, because that is it's life. Like everybody will be on the same path as us at some point. Everyone's going to lose their parent, and
we're just a little bit earlier in the game.
Yeah, we're at the party.
And no, and I have had people reach out, and people have been so nice and just like said the nicest things. And you don't aim to be like motivational for people. I just be myself, and I just try and be the best version of myself for my dad and for myself. And I think when you're doing that, like people vibe off it, you know, they see like a strength and an energy.
It's
and
real
like,
conversation. It's not like fake Instagram bullshit of like everything's great. It's like I'm fucking sad.
I do both. I have days where I'm like, yo, I'm fucking positive. I did this today. All good. And then I write about the times where I'm like, I am so sad and I am in so much pain right now. Because I think it's so good to have the both.
And I think, you know, it is going in, like people like us and a lot of the grief community now are raising the conversation a little bit more, and more people are becoming more aware of it. And I think it's amazing to think like every single individual person that had lost somebody posted something about it, how quickly that can spread because of their individual audiences. Like I do think that strides are being made. I just hope that it carries on. And like it just become, I want schools to talk about it. I want high schools to have people in that tell friends how to support a grieving friend. Like it needs to be just spoke about. Please God.
Well, me being a teacher and taking that into my everyday, there's a little girl in my class. She's 7. I teach year 2s. Her mum passed away a few days before Christmas of cancer. Oh, God. And she came back in. And we'd been told that her mum had passed. And I reached out to the main teacher and I was like, look, if you need someone who like, if she feels like she wants to like
just connect,
connect and be like, you know, we've both gone through the same thing. I would love to be that person, because I think it's so important that she feels like she can talk about it, especially from such a young age, so that when she grows up, she doesn't feel any like resentment or have any of these negative feelings coming up. And bless her, she came in and she was like, Miss, I was like, yeah. She was like, my mummy died of cancer over Christmas. And I was like, are you okay? She said, yeah. And then I said to her, guess what? And she was like, what? And I said, my daddy died of cancer. And she was like, did he? And she was buzzing that we both had this thing in common, that they both died of cancer. And it was just, and we had like a really long conversation. And it was such a positive, sweet conversation, just talking about, and bless her, she was just able to, I guess, as kids do, like she was talking about the hospital, all the things that happened, and she was able to talk about it. And it was, and I think that's just so important.
Yeah, she'll remember that forever. Like I talked to a lot of people who lost a parent when they were in primary school, like as children, and the thing that they always say is that they felt like nobody spoke about their parent. And then it got to the point where they were like 16, 17, and they were just like, I've got a lot of
angry,
touch trauma that nobody's like done. And then at the time that they actually want to talk about it, everybody else in their family is like 10 years down in their grief. So it's a very different, whereas for them, their grief might feel brand new because they've just had that sudden realization that shit, I lost a parent and I was too young. For everybody else, they're just way further down. So they just miss that connection. So I think that's beautiful. I think that's so nice.
It just is so much worse to block someone off from feeling like they can't talk about it. Like she came into school and everyone was just like, oh, hi, you okay? Like treating her as normal. It's like,
Merry Christmas. What's your favourite present?
Like you've got to acknowledge that something has happened. Like I remember, like it's okay, I can laugh about it, but I remember seeing people for the first time. They were like, how's your lockdown been? I was like, my dad died.
Right. Thank you.
But I didn't say that because everyone knows that my dad has died. But I was almost like, why are you asking me what my lockdown was like? You know, my dad died. But they're the kind of questions that make you feel like you can't talk about it. Because I then replied going, wasn't too bad. It was quite bad. My dad died. But you'd like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like, but because I don't know, and that's like a thing that humans do. We go into this like social routine of, are you okay? Yeah, not too bad. And not actually saying how we feel.
Like
because
really in that situation, that person should have said to you like, lockdown must have been really difficult for you. How are you feeling?
Yeah.
Even that, just flipping the question a bit. Yeah, like, Christ.
Yeah.
Insane.
Because that's what makes people feel like they can't talk about their feelings.
Yeah.
Because they go, hi, how are you? And you're like,
I don't mean it.
Okay.
I was listening to a podcast the other day and somebody did a social experiment about whether people were listening to what they were saying or not. So like they basically said the next time somebody asks how you are, they should told this person to reply and say, my mum just died, what about you? So this person went out the other day, somebody said to them passing by, hey, how you doing? And this woman said, my mum just died, what about you? And they went, yeah, great, talk to you later. And it's just like, as humans, we are just not up to scratch, are we?
I did do that once, actually, because I was, that day I was feeling maybe brave or angry. I love
this.
I know. I didn't say it in a horrible way. It was with one of my drama school teachers. I went in to like do some extra work, and he's a nice teacher. So like I knew the conversation was going to go in a good direction. So, and we have like a banterous relationship. So I just said it. He was like, how's your lockdown? I was like, my dad died. And the way that he handled it was just great.
Brilliant.
It was just, he was just like, I'm so sorry to hear that. And then we just had a conversation about it, but there was I was just telling him what happened. He was just asking me questions, but there was none of this, like, there was no weird feeling, because it doesn't have to be weird. You don't have to.
He didn't like retract from it, like,
no.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Okay. Bye.
He just, and I like thrive off people that ask me the questions.
Yeah.
Like, if people are asking me in-depth questions, I'm like, oh, let's go. I'll tell you about it.
Podcast on my dead dad. Yes, please. Come in.
No, because for me, I want people to understand what happened.
Yeah.
I want people to understand how bad it was, so that people are able to understand the frame of mind that I'm in mentally and emotionally. Because like you said, when we spoke about the beginning, I was like, people who have not seen cancer kill someone, I was like, it's just on another level. So when someone asks me, I totally don't mind. I could have a stranger message me and go, what, like, how did your dad die? I would reply like, I'm
definitely.
very, like, I don't mind, because there's no shame in the conversation. And I don't
think there's any shame in people being curious either. I think people feel like they shouldn't ask how somebody died or what happened, but I don't think there's any shame in that. I think everybody's deaths are very different, and even presuming sometimes can be bad.
Curiosity and questions leads to like education. When you're curious about something, you ask a question and then you learn, and then you know. Like there doesn't have to be like a feeling or a motive behind it. You know, if someone just wants to know, like, oh my God, what's cancer like? I'll just tell you, and then you know. Then you know it's quite bad.
Yeah, not good. Wouldn't recommend to a friend.
Yeah, no, tell me about it.
Okay, so the final two questions I have for you are, Would you say that it's changed the way that you go about your life and the way that you approach it now?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. I think losing a parent and watching someone die just gives you like perspective on everything, and you realize that nothing matters. Like, you know, all those things that you let eat you inside. Like, I'm such a worrier as well. Like, I suffer from anxiety, and I let so many things like dictate my day, dictate my mood, dictate my mindset. But then since my dad died, you're able to see things with so much more clarity. Things that I would normally have pissed me off, made me upset, made me angry. I'm just able to step back, take a breath and be like, it's fine.
Yeah.
And I also just use, like I said before, like my dad is just like my motivation for everything. I'm like, my dad would have loved this. Be grateful that you get to do this, because dad would have loved this. So yeah, you're just able to have a judgment on things that lets you, I think, live a bit more of like actually a positive life, because I'm grateful for things that I was not grateful for before.
Yeah. Which is crazy.
I know, isn't it?
It's such a mind boggle how you can appreciate so many beautiful things in life and have so much love for life, whilst at the same time,
I know, being in so much pain,
like hating it.
I know.
It's so weird how it goes in parallel. But like, I don't like always like saying this, because I think people sometimes take like offense, like there's no good in grief, blah blah blah.
But I disagree. There is.
It's difficult, like, and I think it definitely depends on the journey that you're at with your grief. It depends on, it's so circumstantial. But I think if you can get to a point where you can see that what has happened to you is horrendous, we would do anything to take it back. I would have my mum back over any gratitude or lust for life any day of the week, because she was just the most incredible person. She probably would have taught me that as I got older. But I am grateful for the fact that this shitty, terrible thing has given me more gratitude for life, and that I can see things in different ways, people that haven't lost someone. Like,
I'm exactly the same. I say this to everyone. If anyone at any point in my life had asked me, what's the worst thing that could happen to you? It would be my dad dying. At any point, if you had asked me, what would be the worst thing that could happen to you? I would have said my dad dying, because I love that man so much. And so the way I view it is, the worst thing that could have happened to me has happened to me. Like, that's happened. Like, it in my mind, in my mind, it can't be any worse than that. So everything that happens now, I'm just like, it's all right. Do you know what I mean? It's okay. And I will even say this, I am a better person. I like the Georgia that I am now because of my dad dying. Like, I am a better version of myself, and I like myself a hell of a lot more than what I did, the type of person I was before my dad died. And because grief changes you, and it changes you negatively in ways. Like, there's things you have to deal with that, and it alters your personality, and you're like, oh. But I think it also does create a lot of good, because you have to find the good. You have to. I'm 24. I've got the rest of my life to live. I can't
live it in a hole of, just despair.
No, you can't. You literally can't. You gotta live.
You've got to live. I completely agree.
Also, I feel like my dad has become a part of me. He was such a good egg, and I feel like I've taken on a lot of his like characteristics and like personality traits, because he was like my idol. So like, I want to be like him. So I just, do you know what I mean? Like,
you have to do that. That's the kind of thing that I try and see my mum in me as well. Like, I think it's so important to do that, because we are a product of that person. So if you can find a way to kind of carry them along with you, that makes so much difference. Okay, well, my final question to you is, what advice would you give to somebody who's listening who has recently lost a parent?
Okay, obviously it's so hard, because grief is so personal, isn't it? Like, I could have like a few listeners being like, oh, this girl's talking sense, then some other listeners being like, what is she chatting about?
Exactly, so true.
My advice would be to take the time that you need to process it, and do not rush back into your normal routine thinking that it's going to help you to feel normal.
Mm.
You have to step back and take the time and realize that something really, really awful and life-changing has happened to you.
Yeah.
So jumping into your routine has changed now. Your life has changed now. You have changed now. So I think if you're able to really take the time to just step back and just allow like the days to go for the first few weeks, for the first few months, like getting through each day is enough. You do not have to achieve something if you don't want to. You don't have to rush back to work. You don't have to go out and be social with your friends. That's something that I really struggled with. I really didn't feel social in the beginning of my grief. I didn't want to go out and see people. I felt safe in my bubble of family.
Yeah.
So don't feel the pressure that you need to get back into the rat race of life, because you don't need to. I would also say talk about it, even if it makes you feel sad, even if it makes you feel happy, because a problem shared is like a problem halved. Like I know grief is always going to be there, but when you're there and you're able to bounce your feelings and emotions off someone, it lifts it a little bit. Grief's always going to be there, but it just takes the weight, because you feel like, oh, they understand, they know, they listened, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Anything else for someone who's just lost? I would just be kind to yourself.
Yeah. That's like, the first thing that came to my head then. I was like, love yourself.
Just really understand that you're allowed to be sad. You're allowed to like all these horrible feelings. You're allowed to feel sorry for yourself. You're allowed to feel angry. You're allowed to like the worst thing that could possibly has happened. So you are fully within your right to feel all the feelings that you're feeling.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely just like be kind to yourself. And in response to that, just do what you would like to do. If you don't want to go out tomorrow, you don't go out tomorrow. If your friends invite you to the pub and you don't feel like going, I know we're in lockdown, but you don't go. There should be no judgment. And there should be, if you don't want to do something, you don't have to do something, especially in those first like few weeks and few months. Just do what makes you feel safe.
Yeah. I love that. Do what makes you feel safe. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Well, brilliant. Thank you so much. I've absolutely loved this conversation. I feel all like positively griefed out.
I know. I feel like I've been smiling the whole time, and like we've been talking about my dead dad, but like I've been smiling the whole time.
Yeah, it's nice. No, it is. It's so good. I think it's kind of watching people talk about what's happened to them, but they've seen, like, they've managed to kind of create this like good life for themselves. Like, it's always so nice to see. Because grief can take you to bad places, so it's nice when it helps people as well. Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. And like I said before, like if anyone wants to message me, like I'm so open and such an open book. Like, come speak to me about my dead dad.
Absolutely. I'll put your Instagram handle and stuff in the show notes so that anybody that wants to reach out to you, they can do.
Lush. Thank you so much for having me. I've had the best time.